Thank you for joining us for Game.Set.Chat live at a distance. I'm Chanda,
I'm Zina Garrison.
and we're happy you're joining us today. Another fun, exciting show. We've been having a great time doing this, and also kind of seeing how things are progressing week to week as we continue, for the most part, to be staying at home. Zina, what's been going on in your week? How are things at the academy? Are you starting, to get things going again? How is it looking?
Well, it's not looking that great. I mean, it's so up in the air, and especially having to deal with kids, you're always worried. The park actually is still pretty much closed. You can actually bring on four people within the court, and you got to have a space distance, but only four kids. So we haven't been able to do anything, and it's really challenging because the kids want to get back out. But to be honest, Tanda, I don't really know what we're going to do because my whole thing is about groups.
Yeah, I mean, when you're limited by, from interacting and, having to social distance and just stay safe, all that other stuff kind of gets put on the back burner. We actually this week had some live tennis going on in the US for the first time, since quarantining, since we've all been staying at home. And it was pretty interesting, to see, of course, practicing social distancing. Players
Yeah.
were staying 6 feet apart. They weren't touching the same balls. They had one guy in the chair. He had a mask on and gloves as well. I mean, it was interesting to kind of see all of the differences, all of the changes that have had to be implemented. But we saw tennis, and a lot of people were really excited to kind of get a break from the monotony of it all. But that's the challenge for foundations, for academies where you have lots
Yeah.
of kids. You can't really do some of that. So you've got to, be smart and be safe and try to at least take things as slowly as possible.
Yeah, USTA, I think also my director, Yolanda Sadbury, has been doing a lot of virtual conferences, and they're trying to figure it out.
Hmm.
USTA Texas trying to figure out what's the best way possible to bring back, because like I said, especially those young ones, they are the cutest. There's the ones that you try to get involved. There is no way you're going to stop them from touching a little bit of everything.
Exactly. Exactly. Especially when they're excited and you're happy to be there, happy to be playing. You don't want to tamp down on that. So it's a real challenge. But I know, Zena, you guys are going to work it out. You're continuing to do some great things. It's kind of one of the reasons why we started doing this was, to try to give support, to your academy, to people in tennis who make their livings off of tennis, who are struggling during this time. So we're going to continue to do that and just work within, whatever parameters that we have to.
Well, one good thing, Chanda, I forgot to mention is our garden is like growing. We have new strawberries and new, greens. And, it's just been interesting with people not being around so much, just the way
Hmm.
nature has really blossomed. But so we have some new strawberries that are coming.
I'm kind of getting inspired because I call it a black thumb. I mean, I try to grow things and they just die. And I don't know why. I think I water them enough. I try to talk to my plants and whatever else. It just doesn't work. But I've kind of gotten the bug. I've wanted to kind of plant some herbs and have a bit of a garden, and strawberries would be the one fruit that I'd want to try to grow. So I'm still, I'm still kind of holding out some hope that maybe during this time I'll turn my gardening skills around.
You can do it. You can do it.
Well, it's funny. When speaking of academies and young kids and teaching, we've got a really special guest today, whom I'm excited about. We've had so many chats off the cuff at tournaments, away, maybe at the bar, not drinking a lot. Won't do that, but it'll be fun to kind of have him on. He is currently a WTA coach, coach of Sloane Stevens, helped her to her U.S. Open title in 2017. But he's also the founder of Excess Tennis and Education Foundation. So he has done some tremendous work in his community. He is a fantastic coach, a really smart guy, and just fun to talk with. So I'm excited to welcome Kamau Murray to Game.Set.Chat, and so happy that he'll be joining us today. Zena, you know Kamau very well as well. Hey, Kamau, how are you?
Hey,
Hey,
what's up, girls?
Welcome.
Going on?
Happy to have you on a Saturday. What's been going on? What has life looked like for you?
Oh, well, I haven't spent this much time at home since like 2014. So I think that, when you travel 30 weeks out the year, the house kind of runs without you. And when you get home, you're more of an interruption. So I'm trying to
Mhm.
I'm trying to learn how not to take my shoes off at the foot of the doorstep, how to clean up my hairs when I shave out the sink,
Oh,
how to
oh, the
put the
tough stuff.
remember to put the
Yes.
toilet seat down. When you're in a
Oh
hotel,
yes.
you can do all those things in the hotel, and I can put the do not disturb on the door. But when you're at home, you got to be considerate of other people. So it's it's been good to be home, but it definitely is an adjustment to sharing space for
Now
10 weeks now.
you've got two little ones, right?
I got a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 15-year-old.
Oh man. Oh,
Ooh.
oh,
So
oh,
I got
yeah.
a live-in babysitter though, so it's all good. And the younger two are boys, so that's it's nonstop.
Is that
Well,
better or worse? Boys versus your girl.
I think girls are easier when they're younger and hard when they're teenagers. I
yeah.
think boys
Uh-oh.
are harder when they're
Uh-oh.
younger. And then when they get teenagers, they're like, yeah, that's fine. Just don't come home alone.
Well,
you don't worry as
Kamau,
much.
tell us a little bit about your family, because I just love the dynamic of your family, and you and Chanda actually have something in common as well with your family dynamics.
Oh, like what?
Judge and Judge.
Oh, yeah. So,
It's like this alternate reality where we're like the same person
I know,
in terms
right?
of our parents.
So my mom was a teacher, a high school principal for like 26 years. She retired, and then my dad was a lawyer and now is a judge. So I would say my mom, she was always teaching. She was always sort of, the hard, tough one. And I always say my
Hmm.
dad was always a very fair man. So my mom would implement these harsh punishments. You ain't playing tennis for 2 months. My dad would come home and say, okay, that's not realistic. You got to do something after school. Right, he got to pay for college.
Interesting.
Let's punish him another way. Let's not take away tennis, and then we had to find a way to pay for college because we took away tennis. Let's make
Yeah.
him play more tennis.
Let's be smart about this.
Yeah, let's
That's
make him play more
interesting.
tennis. Bigger,
Yeah,
bigger
because
punishment.
well, I mean, Zena, what you're referring to, my mom was a teacher as well, 30 years. My dad was a lawyer and is a judge, still on the bench right
That's
now.
funny.
He's about to be, he's in his last term, but their personalities were opposite. So opposite of your parent. My mom was a softie, and you could always kind of get things by her. Mom, I'm really feeling bad about this, and my dad was the one who was just strict and didn't really want to hear anything except, okay, this is how you do things. This is what we need to do. So it was always interesting, that dynamic. But again, coming from a family where education was so important, where, trying to achieve, trying to be better, like that was always stressed time and time again. And so, yeah, I'm kind of thankful for it, but interesting when I learned about your parents and mine.
Well,
Yeah, so
I want to know from both of you guys, and especially you, Kamau, because you have other siblings that are doing great things as well. So you always hear with the preacher's kids, they're kind of mischievous, kind of bad. What is it with the judge's kids? Are they like on the up and up as well?
um,
Mm,
no,
mm.
I think we're pretty much square. I think my brother was the oldest, and he was like 6'9", light skinned, straight A student, had his grass cutting business, went to private school, and after he went to private school, they couldn't afford to send the next three kids to private school, so we all went to public school. But um, I think we were pretty much, we knew that he was fair but firm, and don't do nothing silly where you got to be calling him in the middle of the night to come get you out of jail. Um, I would say I was probably the most mischievous person because I was a middle child. So I was a middle
Mm.
child, and I could kind of, hide a little bit, right? My younger sister was like super spoiled, really smart, the most, gonna be the smartest in the family, and my brother was a superstar basketball player. So me and my middle sister were just sort of like hiding in between. My sister played volleyball, and I played tennis. And so I also was responsible for getting myself to and from tennis. So I would like go to school, walk to tennis, and then find
Mm.
my own way home. So I had a lot of opportunity
That's
to do
amazing.
to do like whatever I wanted to do because Oh, I could say, yeah, the bus took too long. You know, so if I was leaving tennis at 7 o'clock, right? Oh, the bus took forever to come or whatever. So I probably had more wiggle room than before. But also, you know, like in black families, you got the whole light skin, dark skin dynamic. So my mom was light skinned. My mom was half white. And my oldest brother and my youngest sister were light skinned. And then me and my other sister, the two middle children, my dad, were brown skinned. And so we always felt like we were the black sheep of the family. So me and my, you know, the light skinned kids were the smartest and, you know, got the best grades. And, you know, me and my brown skinned sister were just lost in the middle somewhere. We were just the dummies that worked hard. My sister cooked dinner. My sister cooked dinner every night for all of us, right? My older sister.
Oh, wow.
And then, you know, I was cleaning and all that other stuff. So, you know, it's really created an interesting dynamic amongst the family. Everybody thinks everybody else is the favorite, but
well, yeah, that's always,
the
especially
kids
middle,
definitely the favorite.
especially when you're middle child and you're dealing with it too. Yeah, it's like you're just trying to find it. You're trying to find a space. You're trying to find where you can fit in. You know.
And I was happy not to fit in. Like I even tennis sort of fit me because I enjoy being by myself. I don't really, you know, like gotta like be the loudest person in the room or the most verbose, or I kind of enjoy being in the corner and keeping it low key. So I you know, the whole middle child dynamic I grew up to love. You know, I don't know if I wanted to be first or last.
Yeah.
You know, I'm all right with being like, if I had to be like top 10 in the world, I'd be all right at like number 6 or 7.
Oh, we don't believe that. No.
Whatever.
We know that is not necessarily true.
Yeah.
And if your pupil Sloan Stevens was watching right now, she know that ain't true either. So don't even try it.
Yeah.
Definitely. So what are some of the lessons that you learned and about the whole dynamics you were just telling that you're passing on to your kids? Your kids in your family and also your kids that you teach.
Well, so I would say, you know, Jen teaches the kids to like be very tidy and to never have mess, right? So my wife was an only child. So, you know, her things growing up were exactly where she left them. You know, I shared a room with my sister till I was 14. And so I would put something down and then it was not going to be there. And so I'm a little more relaxed and a little more go with the flow and like sort of like make adjustments. You know, oh, it's not there. Okay, let's figure out a different way. And Jen is more like buy the book, you know, come in, take your shoes off, stack them up nice and neat, you know, clean the toothpaste out the sink after you brush your teeth. You know, who touched my perfume? You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So with my boys, I try to just, you know, obviously teach them to be good, you know, respectful to their mother, to teach them to love each other more. So I would say my siblings, you know, every one of my siblings has an advanced degree, you know, a master's degree in something. And so I think my house was really competitive, unless like, you know, we all loved each other, but we weren't softies. You know, we weren't like, oh, I love you. See you when we get home. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't hugging and kissing my parents goodbye at all. But like for my kids now, they like, I'm most proud, like my younger two boys love each other. You know what I mean? And like, they say, oh, you're my best friend. You're my best friend. Do you want to share this? I try to like teach my boys to sort of love each other. You know what I mean? Because I think that's something that I missed, right? My brother is 6 years older than me. So, you know, he was in college. He was a sophomore in college. I was a freshman in high school. So we really were not close enough in age to do things together.
Yeah.
Right. And my older sister is 5 years older than me. And then my younger sister is 4 years younger than me. So there was such a large gap that when I say I was in the middle, I was really in the middle. You know what I mean?
Like floating on your own.
I was floating,
yeah.
You know what I mean? So, you know, my boys are 3 and 5. So they're close enough to be able to share the same things, which they don't know how to share. I got to teach them how to share. But they're close enough to sort of love each other, you know, and I think that I try to teach them, you know, how to love, but also compete. I'm trying to get them to compete and, you know, to play more games and less TV. And we don't have any video games in the house because I didn't grow up playing a video game. I never had Nintendo.
Oh, wow.
Nobody, me nor my brother. No Nintendo, no Sega Genesis.
No Atari.
Nothing. It was
that's my age.
do the dishes, help mom in
Mhm.
the garden, practice your sport, and do your schoolwork.
What about
Wow.
your kids in your foundation? Like what translates? Do you teach them? What do you teach them?
Well, I think that the number one thing I want to teach them, or that we try to teach them, is respect, competitiveness,
Mm.
appreciation, and trying to like sort of build a team atmosphere. I think you all know this is a big individual sport, but
Mhm.
individuals don't make it in this game. You know what I mean? Everybody that makes it has a team. Uses those around them. You need people to practice against, so you can't private lesson yourself to death. You need people to play with and practice your stuff on, right? You need people to like give you exposure to different types of balls. And so I'm trying to, number one, teach them to be tough, right? And compete. Teach them to be respectful of their coaches, right? Because no one in tennis gets there without coaching. I think that this
Yeah.
Oh,
sport,
yeah.
this sport
Yeah.
more than anything, you got to have somebody to teach you the technique, teach you the strokes, right? Then you got to have somebody help, teach you some tactics. I mean, this coaching is like so important in the sport that being able to receive information and criticism is one of the things that we teach them, how to be good receivers of information. And that's something that I think I'm learning to be better about even as an adult, and how to be a better receiver of information. So, the game has so many gifts,
Mm.
but we all know that the game historically has been like limited to like the kids that come from privilege, right? And sometimes those kids are not great receivers of information, or
Mhm.
don't necessarily have a good team sort of spirit. And that's one of the things that I think that when I get kids in our program that do come from privilege, is that we break it down real quick. Like we break that up. We got to get that out you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether it's run for every ball, whether it's in or out, whether it's coming into the court and speaking to everybody on the court.
Mhm.
Um, so it's like every kid needs a different type of lesson. But I
Yeah.
think, you all know that to be like a well-rounded tennis player and to help use your tennis to make you a great person, you got to have like toughness, competitiveness, respect, appreciation,
Yeah.
those things I think that you can use tennis to teach, that I think will help them as adults.
Now, Kamau, I'm curious. How did you get into tennis?
Uh,
Family, someone you knew,
yeah,
just happened to pass by a tennis court.
so
How
I
did you get into it?
so I had so when I was 7 years old, my dad took my brother's AAU team. Me and my brother played basketball, like I said. So he took his AAU team to Africa to play against the Senegalese national team. And so I went
Mm.
along with him. Obviously, I wasn't able to play. It was like a team of high school guys and then me, right? And so when we came back July 27th, all the summer camps were closed, right? They weren't accepting any more kids. They were all full. Every
Mhm.
basketball camp, every baseball camp in my area. But the one camp that was still accepting people was a tennis camp.
No.
Because nobody in my neighborhood wanted to play tennis, right? So they like, yeah, bring them on.
Ah. And what neighborhood was that?
South
Where
Shore.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up on the south side of Chicago. So
Okay.
it was a park called Jesse Owens Park right by CVS
Uh-huh.
High School on 87th and Jeffrey. And my uncle Reggie Williams, my godfather Reggie Williams, was a big tennis player. So he told my mom, "Yeah, take them to Jesse Owens Park. They still taking kids. I guarantee you they take them." So I didn't even have a tennis racket. So he gave me a tennis racket and gave me some balls. And my mom, we drove down to the park just to see, if they were still accepting kids. And he said, "Oh yeah." And then my mom asked him how much was the camp. And he said $12 for the rest of the summer. And she said, "Boy, get out of my car."
She threw you
I'm
out.
like, "What?" Well, shit, I don't want to play no tennis.
That's a steal.
That's for
$12?
wimps. Oh,
What?
$12 for the rest of the summer. I was like, this is a sport for wimps. I don't want to play no tennis. And then she's like, "Well, I got to go to work. So get out the car, otherwise I'm going to drag you down the street." So, and there's a funny story. My mom literally would drag you down the street. My mom actually ran over my arm in her Volvo station wagon by accident. So
What?
when she was like, "I drag you down the street," she wasn't playing. So I got out the car
Left
and,
or right arm?
huh?
Left or right arm?
She ran over my right arm.
Wow.
Yeah, by accident. So anyway,
I hope so.
And he's not big as a minute, so
but you know what? No break, no fracture. I was all
That
good.
is crazy.
Yeah. So my next thing, so okay, I got out, went to play tennis, had this tennis racket that was given to me. And so I'm like, all right, well, who's gonna pick me up? She's like, take the bus. Right? I was like, well shit, I'm like, I can't take the bus with this tennis racket. Cause once I get off the bus and gotta walk to the house, I can't have nobody see me carrying a tennis racket. So for the whole summer, I left my racket with the coach. Oh, coach, I left my racket at the courts. Can you get it?
Oh,
So I
wow.
left my racket the whole
So
summer
the
there.
stigma of showing that you were playing tennis was too
Absolutely.
much
Yeah.
in your neighborhood.
In my neighborhood. So
That
I
is
didn't want to
crazy.
get off the bus and have to walk 3 blocks to the house, having anybody knew I played tennis. You know what I mean? Because it
Wow.
wasn't commonplace and they think that I was soft or whatever that is. So
Yeah.
that, pride is something I also try to instill in the kids. You know what I mean? I think
Mm.
now, now with the Williams sisters and Sloan and, um, it's a little more, you know, common that black
Yeah.
kids from
It's a lot more
a
acceptable.
lot more
Acceptable. Yeah.
acceptable, right?
Yeah.
Kind
And
of, it makes you unique and it's cool.
well, I mean, I'm curious. You talked about how important coaching and, instruction and just having, that knowledge base from a coaching figure. How did, what kind of coaches did you have at that stage? Where was it really important for you in terms of how your game was able to grow? Because you would go on to play college tennis and,
Yeah.
to all these great things. How did you get from where you were there, hiding your tennis racket,
Right.
to, the player that you eventually became and with the knowledge base that you have?
So I would say early on, I had um, coaches that were good people, right? So when I look
Mm.
back on my tennis career and I look at who was really great technically, who was really great tactically, who was just teaching me how to be a good person and a good student and a good kid. I would say early in my career, I had like sort of the inexpensive sort of tennis regimen, $12 summer camp, right? With Cassius Little. And Cassius Little, was like more of a great mentor and a great man than stand here and hold the grip this way and da da da. It was more
Mm.
about sportsmanship and that kind of thing, and encouraging participation. And then I had a guy named Lamont Bryant who was also like big character, like really big on character and teamwork and
Hmm.
discipline and listening, right? And like sort of taught me how to like receive information in a way that was respectful. Um, and then I sort of got into like I started taking lessons from a guy Tyrone Mason, who was a little more technical, right? But heavy on discipline. Then I would start taking lessons from a guy named Trung, who was an Asian guy who was like straight up technical, no personality, no conversation, just straight technique. And then Earl of Pearl and
Uh-huh.
Rainbow Beach, Earl. So it was all these guys, but I think they all brought something different. But I would say early it was more on how to be a good young black African American dude in the neighborhood playing tennis, from a character standpoint, how to develop, how to respect people. And then as I got to like 13 or 14, I started to discover the private clubs,
Mm.
where maybe the coaching was a little more technical, a little more structured, a little more, tennis, not necessarily
Okay.
tennis for life, right? And I think
Gotcha.
that,
Yeah,
um,
we got to win now. We got to learn how to win, how to
yeah,
play, how to,
Yeah.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Then my
specific.
last couple of years in high school, I got to take lessons from a guy named Ron McDaniel who played at Ohio State, and he was like really great tactically. You know what I mean? So I would say I understand how kids learn in the neighborhood, right? And get lessons that they can afford and what can be taken from that and how that can help shape you so that when you decide that this is what you want to do, then you're able to receive the super highly boring, technical, right? And then the
Boring.
tactical. Oh, yeah. I mean, we all know I say tennis is boring early, right? Learning how to do it over and over again and being told that's right, no, that's wrong, no, that's right,
Mm.
no, do it like I said it, right? That can be boring, you know what I mean? But I think competing becomes fun, right? And
Hmm.
so, when I was playing tennis early from like 7 to 14, I played basketball as well. So I played tennis, 4 days a week, and I would play basketball at the YMCA 3 days a week. And my dad was the
Yeah.
coach of my YBA team.
Okay.
So I got sort of individual stuff, and then I also got the team stuff. I got my dad to be the coach of the basketball. My dad played, basketball at a high level too. Norm Van Leer was the best man in his wedding. So like basketball was in like my family's blood. And I always sort of was like indifferent to tennis. It was like, yeah, this is convenient babysitting. You know what I mean? It's 2 hours.
And that's exactly what it is. And then, interesting listening to you kind of bring about all the things that you did to get to where you are now. So now I really understand how you got to be the person that you are as far as giving back into the community, because correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there's so many people touch their lives in so many ways, and now you're giving back to others.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even my mom. I mean, my mom used to tutor kids in my basement every night. So my sister cooked dinner every night because my mom was in the basement tutoring people. Like the CEO of the Chicago Public School System in Chicago is a woman named Janice Jackson, who every day was over my house in my basement getting tutored by my mother. And she speaks about it very publicly too, how instrumental my mom was. So I grew up like seeing my parents give. And the only reason I started playing tennis was because my dad took 20 black kids to Africa to, on like a cultural exchange. You know what I mean? So, I totally just lucked up and got into tennis. It was not by design. My mom, to this day, has never even seen me hit a tennis ball.
But she gave that $12.
She gave the $12, and when I started taking private lessons, she would pull up in the driveway at the club, and I would run out and get the check, and I'd run the check back in. But she wasn't coming in to watch. She wasn't even coming in to pay. She was like, "Come on out, get the check, take it back in." And then she was going to pick up my next sibling. You know what I mean? So, like I'm looking back on it, I'm more conscious of what each person that was in my life did for me, right? And how it contributed to like my overall sort of being and how I look at tennis and how I really, see what's important at different stages. And that helps me sort of look at kids. I can look at an 8-year-old, 9-year-old and say, okay, they don't really love tennis right now. They need to have fun right now and love it first.
Yeah.
Once you start getting real technical and you start trying to make everything perfect, if you don't love it, you can be like, oh man, forget this. This dude's sitting here every other ball, he's telling me I'm doing something wrong. Right? Because tennis is like that. It's right and wrong. There's a right way to hit a forehand. There's a right way to hit a backhand. And when you're on my court, my job is to teach you how to hit it the right way. And so you spend a lot of time telling somebody wrong.
Yeah.
Ain't no Montessori education where it's like, oh, let me just give them the ball in the racket, let them feel it out. No, do it this way.
That's amazing. I mean, so one of the things we try to do, I want to just remind everybody, one of the things we try to do is to take questions from our viewers, our listeners who send questions in. So we're definitely going to get to a few questions come out because people have been sending in questions for you. But I'm curious. I want to ask one more thing in terms of, how you've gotten to the place where you are, because you could have done a lot of things. I mean, I mentioned you're a really smart guy. I mean, entrepreneurial, in terms of, did you get your MBA, your business, you went to business school, was it Florida A&M undergrad? And, so you are a businessman as well, but you chose tennis and you have translated your business acumen, to encompass tennis and helping others and building this major facility in Chicago, raising, money. How did you do it? How did you translate your skills? Number one, why did you choose tennis? Even after playing and when you could have gone into so many other areas, why did you choose tennis? And how have you translated those business skills to build what you've built?
So I worked in corporate America from, out of college. Like I did several internships during college. I didn't even in college, I knew I didn't want to play pro tennis. Right. So I didn't play like summer ITA circuits and, try to play all these futures and 15K. I didn't play all of that stuff. I knew, it was like tennis was like my backup to like, oh, I didn't make the basketball team. You know what I mean? So I was like real clear that I was going to go into business, during college. And so I started doing internships. And then after college, I went to work for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals in New York City. And then was really, really taught how to work. The New York sort of working culture is you work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at a minimum. You know what I mean? Even if you're not on Wall Street, you're putting in hours, right? My boss sort of helped shape me. I worked for a guy named Forrest Harper, who was like the highest ranking black person in Pfizer at the time. He was the VP, and he was a former military guy. And he was like, you need to, I get here at 7. You need to be here before I get here.
Mm.
My train leaves at 5:45, and you need to leave after I leave. And so he taught me how to work, you know what I mean, in terms of how to really adapt to the culture. So, and then I had another guy who, you know, everybody in New York, they got to go out for a drink after work. So my boss, Krishna, he had just had twins, and he didn't want to go home at 5:45. So he wanted to kind of let them wind down, let them go to sleep first. So every day after work, I had to go have a drink with them. You know what I mean? So I was 7 a.m. to like 9 p.m. because when you're out with your boss, you're still kind of working, right? Even though you're having cocktails. And then when I moved back to Chicago, I still was working for Pfizer and just started teaching, you know, after work. Because, you know, when I was growing up as a kid, it was you go to school and you go to the tennis court until 7 o'clock. So when I started getting off work at 5 o'clock, I'm like, well, shit, what do I do now? It's only 5 o'clock. It's still daylight outside. I'm not used to, you know, being off work and it being daylight, you know, because even in college, we're practicing until 7:30. And then you go to you know, eat in the food hall. So it was sort of odd not doing something until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And so I started just teaching on the side, you know, and then an opportunity came up to sort of take over the facility where I learned to play. So like the facility on the south side, I learned to play there, Katrina, right? And so it was sort of historic. A lot of you, Zina, you came there when you would come play the Virginia Slims, and Pam Shriver came through there. And I remember Robin Givens. I met Robin Givens in Chicago. She gave me my kiss. I ain't watched her
he's,
for like 2
he's
weeks.
still feeling it right now too.
She got up from her seat and she left her scarf, and I was a ball boy for one of Lori's matches, and I ran her scarf. I was like, oh, thank you. I was like, oh man. So that's sort of how I got into the game. And then when the opportunity came up to take over the facility and sort of recreate like this, you know, low cost, right, affordable and free tennis environment that I think we need in Black and brown neighborhoods. Then I took that opportunity, but I was still working. So, you know, we moved into the facility October 4th of 2008, and I worked until 2014, a full-time job. So for 6 years, it was just sort of, you know, making sure the facility could stay open. And we had like, you know, 12 other guys in there teaching, doing the real hard work.
Yeah.
Paying the bills and paying the rent and making sure we could stay open.
Because you literally worked up until, I remember this so well, until you came to Australia, where you were working with me, and you were working with Taylor Townsend.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying that you were getting ready to leave Pfizer. And I was like, really? Like, but you were like, I'm taking this serious. This is what I want to do. And I remember that conversation.
Yeah, I remember January 27th. So we got so, you know, January 27th, they released the year-end numbers from the previous.
Of what year?
Right? January 27th of 2015? 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we had just got 2014 numbers from my company, and I was number 1 in the region. So we got the report that I was number 1 in the region, and then my reply email was my resignation. Like, what? We don't understand. You know what I mean? You're doing all right. What's the big deal here? So, but, you know, obviously you can't travel. You know, you only get 2 or 3 weeks of vacation, right? And the slams to eat that up by itself. So it just came to a point.
And then having somebody in the ear like me talking about, wait a minute, you said you were helping me with Taylor, and me, you know, where are you? I'm doing this by myself. So I appreciate you.
Yeah.
And we were a great team, and Taylor had a very good, you know, upbringing from the start. So Chanda, let's get to some of those questions.
Well, we have one question I want to ask you. Speaking of your academy, the kids you've worked with, Felicia Owens has a question about future champions, some of your players. Do you see any future champions within your program right now?
Well, I think every one of them will be a champion in life. And every one of them, I think, will have the opportunity to play college tennis. I think that, you know, going pro is like lightning in a bottle, right? It's like really hard. And I would say right now, I don't honestly look at any of the children and say, you know what, that kid's going to be a pro, right? I'd say, hey, if they continue to develop, right? And, you know, on the women's side, you know, women, they peak later. you see some of the women having like their better years later, like a Halep, right? Like a Sloan. Where on the men's side, 18, 19, 20, you kind of got to be showing that promise. So I think some of the young girls in there still have time to develop. So I won't put a cap on what they can achieve. But, I think a lot of coaches say, oh, yeah, you can go pro, that kind of thing. Why not? I'm like, well, having been on the court every week with pros, I'm like, ooh, no, that's like that's some
Mhm.
rare God-given stuff there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That
Yeah.
it's all taught. Some of that is like, some of these players are some of the most gifted players and people in the world. That those gifts plus the instruction helps make them what they are. So
Yeah.
I think there's like one or two that I work with here that have the potential to go pro.
Yeah.
Not like Coco Golf 15 type go pro, but 22, 23 if they're still in the
Yeah.
game,
Build a
right?
career.
And yeah,
Yeah.
if they maybe do a year or two of college, right, to get that 20 hours a week against good competition.
Yeah.
If
Mhm.
the parents don't overthink the process and start zigzagging and making wrong turns,
And a little
perhaps,
luck. You need a
and
little luck.
and a little luck, a lot of luck.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know what I
No
mean?
Yeah.
injuries, stay healthy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but in general, I honestly, I'm, I don't want to say like pessimistic, but I'm like very cautious whenever I say, do I see a future WTA player champion? I'm like really cautious
Yeah.
as it relates to that. But do I see a bunch of college players? 100%. Every kid in our program should have the opportunity to go to college. Every one of them will be a better person because of what, this is what I talked about, going to school, then having to go to tennis, right? Instead of going to school and going home and playing video games or just doing nothing. I think all those things, will help make them like champions in whatever else they do.
Mhm.
Also think like the young girls, like tennis, learning how to compete and be alone and stand on your own 2 feet for young girls, learn how to speak up, right? Call your own lines, right? And interact with an opponent really helps them in corporate America, right? Because in tennis, ain't nobody giving you anything. They're trying to
Yeah.
take it from you, right? And
Mhm.
so, for boys, I think they kind of innately compete. Even when I look at my boys, you give them a ball and they just gonna tackle and try to fight each other for it. Where girls may say, hey, you know what, you can have it. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And so I think that some of the girls,
Not us,
not
Kamau.
y'all,
Not us.
right? Which is why y'all achieve what you achieve. But some of the girls, if they can like develop this competitive spirit and not expecting anything to be given to them and learning how to really compete, that can actually help them tremendously in corporate America. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
female, directors and bosses at Pfizer, I was like, oh no, she definitely was an athlete because she's crazy competitive. Right?
That's fantastic. But now I want to kind of tag that a little bit. We have a question from Bob Bynum, who is asking, with your experience on the WTA tour, what are some of the things that you think some of the new players may lack in their preparation to compete successfully? What would you like to see more of these new players, kind of doing or bringing to the table?
I actually think the newer players are bringing a different level of athleticism.
Mm.
I would say like, Martina Navratilova and Serena kind of brought the physicality to women's tennis, right? To like a
Mhm.
heightened level. And everybody else sort of follows suit. And I see this next generation, like some of these kids are like big kids. I mean, they're like
Yeah.
16, 17. I'm like, whoa, that's a big girl, right? You know what I mean? And so I think that the new kids are bringing things to the game. I don't know that they're really lacking anything. I think that they're lacking experience,
Hmm.
and I think like some of the mental part needs to continue to develop. But from a skill set standpoint, I think that they've done a good job of watching where the game is now. And I think they're bringing new attributes. I mean, they're coming forward a little more than I would say this current. Like I would say if you took 5 of the newcomers and just pick 5 random sort of seasoned veterans, I would say a greater percentage of the newcomers are coming forward more often, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
there's
playing
Okay,
more
that's
doubles.
good.
You know what I'm saying? So
That's
I
good.
think they're bringing more things to the game. I would say on average they're bigger, right? So if I look at like a Katie McNally, right, like the
Hmm.
physicality she brings to the game, is like big for her age. You know what I mean? And compared to some of these other ones, so I think that like I don't know that they're lacking. They're just lacking experience, right? And I think that, you can't substitute experience. And I think if they sort of be careful with the social media, right? Because social media is like a right now thing, right? It's like a right now, and look at me.
And it can be a distraction.
It's a
right? I
huge
mean,
distraction, right?
it's
And
a
it
big
creeps
part of
into
it.
your mental, right? And so it's hard to develop mentally if you're not like focused and clear about what you need to do, and you like listening to all the comments, right? I think that Federer said something a couple of U.S. Opens ago. He said a conversation can change a mindset, right?
Oh, for sure.
He was talking about the conversation with the referee and Nick Kyrgios, and he said conversation can change a mindset, and that's coaching, right? And so when the young kids are putting things out on social media and they're getting comments and they're reading comments, right? That's conversation.
Yeah.
So it can really change their mindset. And so I think that's the danger that this new generation has that the other ones didn't have to deal with, right? I think that, the Sloan's generation had probably their own types of pressures from a smaller set of people. This new generation's got like pressures from 4,000 people they never met.
Yeah.
Right. and
we'll never meet.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me to a thing that I was thinking about earlier. You are Black history for us, as far as there hasn't been many African-American coaches that have coached Grand Slam champions. And singles champions, it's only been you and Richard Williams. And then you would put John Wilkerson and Willis Thomas in there as well, that have actually coached Grand Slam champions. Did you think about that when you won the U.S. Open? Well, when Sloan won the U.S. Open, but you coached it. But as you said earlier, it takes a team. It's not just one person.
No, I didn't think about that. I didn't even know that. I think the first person that told me that was Willis. When I think Willis called to congratulate me, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm just following behind you." He said, "No. You in rare air. I never did this. I never did that." He said, "No, you done surpassed what I did." So I wasn't even thinking about that because I didn't, I wasn't necessarily a tennis historian. I mean, I obviously have relationships with historic figures in tennis like Zina and Chanda and Billy and was a ball.
He just called us old. You know that,
Chanda. He said what?
Historic.
He said historic. Historic. He used a nice word for it.
But it never really dawned on me that there was, that sort of low representation, right? And then it got me to thinking, right? Because one of the common denominators was that all those Black coaches you mentioned really coached Black players, and so the sad part of that is showed that only Black players are giving Black coaches a chance.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So that but the flip side of that is that it shows there's value in translation, right? There's value in Black coaches coaching Black players because there's maybe a little bit of wiggle room to speak more freely, right? But it also, if you looked at it from a different lens, it means they're the only ones giving coaches that opportunity. So I didn't think about that because I didn't know it, but it was, obviously staying connected to those who came before me and being respectful of them, when they called, and I learned how to listen, you know what I mean? And just be quiet. And then, Willis told me all of that. And I was like, oh, wow. That's good, I guess. That's great, But now I've tried to sort of, create opportunities for others to come behind. If there's someone's in need of a trainer, there's African-American trainers that can be out there, or, African-American hidden partners, and getting them to now becoming coaches, right? And getting coaching positions. So I think I've also tried to make good referrals to, African-Americans who are sort of in the orbit that can handle, that environment. Right. And can be good teammates. Right. Because you got to be a good teammate. Right. Because the player's the boss. So it's not about, being a great hitter and a great grid. You got to be like a great person because you got to travel the world with this person, with this player. And, you got to like do everything for the player. And so I think that's more. Right. And so that's I've tried to sort of make sort of those referrals to sort of get opportunities to other people. Because I was grateful for the opportunity that I've had to coach.
Well, speaking of referrals and kind of creating that community, you're doing some of that now. You've started, a barbershop. I don't know. What do you call it? Is it a series? Is it barbershop conversations? what do you call it, and how did that idea come about? I mean, it's you, a number of other players, like Gael Monfils, and we had Francis Tiafo as well, Coco Gauff's dad, Corey Goff, in there. How Jameer Jenkins, you talk about, sort of, that community referrals and coaches, hitting partners. But how did that idea come about? And will it continue? And we have one of our questions about that is from Brothers on Tennis, Zina, our
Oh,
friends who have been watching, I think, every show. But how did that come about, and do you foresee more of that?
So I think over the years, you go to Wimbledon, you go to French Open, and sometimes the players like to go to dinner by themselves, right? And you end up having to go to dinner, and we try to get us together, so we all coordinate. Hey, where y'all going to eat? What time are you going to eat? Let's go eat. Let's go. I'm going to eat with Sloan, and then I meet y'all after, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
last year Wimbledon, it was me, Jermaine, Abdul, Francis TFO, Zach, and a couple other people came in and out, and we were just around dinner talking, and the conversation was like so honest, right, and so authentic, and everyone sharing their experiences. And I was sitting here thinking about like this should be heard, right? This is sort of valuable information and insight and honesty that I think the next generation of tennis players, black or white, needs to hear, right, in a very articulate fashion. And so I was like, you know what, we need to film this. And so after Wimbledon, we went to City Open, and then we went to Francis's barbershop because I needed a haircut just in general, right? And so me, Zach, Francis, Chris Eubanks, Chris Hill, we all went to get haircuts, and we're just talking again. And then we said, okay, this is like really something, right? Because there's like some great tennis minds and great experience in the room. And so then, went to Tennis Channel and said, hey, this is something that we do on a regular basis in an informal fashion. We get together, we talk about tennis. And I think it could be interesting, right? Because again, we're all in this together. And when we look at the tennis content in the landscape, we are far behind the NFL, the NBA, baseball. And if we intend to catch up, we've got to innovate, right? And we've got to sort of open our doors. Tennis players like to kind of be in the silo and, be really private, but we've got to open up the doors to open up the sport. And so, they said, yeah, if you can pull it off, right? We have a hard time getting people to do things like this, but if you do it, oh no, I can do it, right? When I call them, they're going to show up, right? So, we invited guys to get together and talk on camera, and I think everyone understood that no one was going to hang anybody out to dry, right? That, we were going to have control of the content, right? So you can speak freely and we'll edit it out. But it is important to share for somebody else. And it wasn't about no one got paid. It wasn't about making any money. It was just doing it purely for the culture, right? And so, it was a great thing, and we're going to continue to do it. So we're going to look at it.
But now you need to get paid. You need to get paid because it's very good.
Absolutely. Now, when you're doing something like that, you're trying to kind of consider, the authenticity of what you want to put out there, showing sort of behind the curtain some of these conversations. Is it a challenge? What are the challenges of sort of creating, those real conversations, knowing that there's a camera right there? Players, sort of used to not showing parts of themselves, sides of themselves when there are cameras around. How did you sort of get around that? Is it difficult, or are you still kind of working on that part of it?
Well, like I said, I think this new generation is more comfortable in front of the camera because they got the camera phone out all the time, right? Their Instagram, but they're more comfortable like just being on camera. I think that from the people who were in it, like the African Americans who were in it, they're like very charismatic anyway in a very natural sort of fashion. So it was very easy. And so it really wasn't hard. I mean, it was just be honest, and then I think because everyone in the room is traveling together, we all know what we're talking about. Like when someone says sticks and sushi, you know exactly where that is, right? When someone says the dog and fox, you know exactly where that is, right? When someone mentions Miss Co, you know exactly where it is, right? So we're talking about things that we all share in common. And so the conversation flows. But from my standpoint, like one of my old bosses at Pfizer, he always said ABC, always be coaching, right? And so having be the only person in that, sort of setting that has sat in a coach's box of a Grand Slam final, right, and then the Grand Slam champion, I always use it as an opportunity to sort of listen and respond in a way that helps those in the room think about things differently. I mean, Francis is young, Chris Eubanks is young, Corey Goff is, new on the tour.
Yeah.
Last year was like Jermaine's first sort of head coach job with Naomi. So there's always things that we can pass to each other. And so part of like sort of the questions that I ask are like trying to lead them to think about their next move and how they should, consider the game, and maybe sharing some of those experiences.
And you did a great job, because one of my favorite pieces is watching, Monfils pass on his wisdom, but in a jokingly way. And it was just kind of, and then Francis kind of messing with him and going back and forth. So that's what I think is great about what you have created with that show, is the different parts of wisdom that they were allowing to, as you say, coaching each other and not even really realizing that's what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And just that interaction. I mean, we talked about this, Zina, on one of our other shows, and how when I came out, it was, Zina and Katrina and Lori, and they do these dinners at Wimbledon, and like you showed up, like, oh, it's a dinner.
Well,
It's
hold
like,
on, let's
okay.
back that up. Zina did the but
Zina
no,
did the Zina for sure. Zina was mother.
Now let me tell you, did Zina ever tell you about that dinner we did at Ursula's house in Australia?
Oh God!
I don't think she told me about that one.
And okra. So Zina was like, "Oh, we going, we always get together and cook, so we got to go over Ursula's house." I didn't know who Ursula was, but now I know. Ursula has touched 10 generations of tennis players.
Yeah.
So Zina,
I mean, but that's important, to have that,
Serena,
the
they all came and
continue.
cooked.
Exactly. And to have those connections made, and, to have, sort of the community that's created, because in tennis, it's hard. You mentioned it's an individual sport. You have your teams around you, but it's your individual teams. It's your people that are there just for you. And it's sometimes hard to make those connections, and, to always also feel like you're part of, the connecting and the connections of with people around you. So I think it's crucial, especially for younger players and players of color, Black players who, it's always a few of us, we're never, it's never, I wouldn't say the comfort, because I mean, we're comfortable, but we're never, sort of, I guess, free enough, because we're so few. It's one or two of us in every situation. And even then, if you're competing, it can be hard to really open up and be able to talk to others. So I think it's important to create that. And as a more mature player, Kamau, because you get close to us, I guess it's up to you, and it's up to us to try to do that for the next generations.
Yeah, I think it's a safe place to talk. I mean, everyone needs a safe place to talk, right? And also, every player needs a safe place to land.
Yeah.
Well,
after a loss.
And that's very interesting. And Kamau, you were talking about that dinner that we did in Australia. It was very interesting, because I would never forget, Venus actually pushed it on, because she heard that I was in town and her mother wasn't around. And she said to me, Zina, you got to come over and make some fried chicken for us. And I was like, what? And so that's how that actually all started up. And I'll never forget when Venus came, then Serena walked in.
Yeah.
And then you had a friend of yours.
Les Coney. Les Coney
yes, that came from Chicago. And we were with Ursula, which is our Ursula and Neville, our family from Australia. And like you said, Chanda, just sitting around, and we were all just eating and having a good time. But sometimes, especially in Grand Slam tournaments, you need that relaxed feeling to just feel free to be you.
Yeah. Just it get the tension of it, because it's already nerve wracking. It's probably the most stressful 2 weeks, but it's the most important, each major, because that's where you want to play your best. But having those down days, or at least one evening where you can relax a little bit, sometimes is crucial to it.
And at that point in my career, I don't think I said a word the whole night. I think I was sitting at the
just
table.
listen.
It was one of those just listen, where you had Zina, You had Ursula, who was talking about the days with Katrina and Chanda and everybody else, and you had Serena and Venus, and it was like, let me just listen, right? Because they've been out here all this time. I'm listening to the interaction. I'm listening to the honest conversations they were having with you, Zina, and you were kind of covertly kind of coaching and helping them.
Always.
While you was frying up that chicken outside. I remember I was like, Lord, I'm gonna go home smelling like fried chicken. But yeah, that was one of the like my first year in Australia, and I was like, yeah, this is my time to listen. So I mean, now I probably speak a little bit more, but then it was like, let me just listen.
And Taylor was just sucking it up as well. She wasn't saying much. So
yeah, that's a major dinner right there.
I have one more question before, because we're kind of getting toward the end or whatever. So where would you like to see yourself in the next couple of years? Where I want you to see where I want to see you. I always want to see you keep passing on that wisdom. From the time I've met you, I've always called you old school to new school. You have been amazing. So where would you like to see yourself in the next couple of years as a coach, but more than anything for your foundation, and talk a little bit about the village part of how you came up with that name.
Yeah. So I think as a coach, I don't necessarily have any personal goals. Like as a coach, my goals are Sloan's goals. So I don't, have any, I want to do this in the next couple of years because it's not really up to me, right? I'm, as a coach, my goal is to help her achieve whatever she decides she wants to achieve for however long she wants to continue to achieve it, right? So that's sort of, my goal is to just sort of help push her where she says she wants to go. And so I think you got to always have like that blank slate where you don't have any selfish goals. It's like, no, we're doing what she wants to do, right? And she says she want to do this, so I'm gonna help her do it, right? And at times it's gonna be uncomfortable, but she says she want to do it, so this is right? So that's sort of my goal as a coach, is just to really stay open and to stay on her page. And in the past, that's French Open final, Montreal, final. It's worked so far when we're sort of on her page and moving in the same direction. Personally, I mean, I'd like to see the foundation obviously grow. We're still raising money. We want to raise probably $8 million in the next couple of years. We want to continue to grow our program at the lower end, so that the next time you ask me this question and you say, hey, do you see anybody that's a future Grand Slam champion? Now I have a bigger base to say, yeah, you know what? That one. You know what I mean? But in order to really get that one, we got to grow the base. So I'd love to sort of grow the program and develop the area around the facility. We got a lot of vacant land around the facility. And so, the whole village concept was to use the tennis facility as a catalytic investment to now develop housing. And, for people who come to the facility now, there's not really a lot of places to eat around the facility. So I'd like to see, partners show up like a Chipotle or whoever else to come and set up shop. You know what I mean? So I'd like to see sort of the area around it sort of develop. I want to grow my staff, right? I want to bring more different views of tennis. So I love to bring more international coaches to Chicago. Just so we're not limited in like very narrow thinking. I mean, other countries do tennis really well. The Czech women are like killing it, right? French men are killing it, right? So I think there's so much expertise around the world that if I could bring some of that to this neighborhood and expose our kids to that, I mean, there's a lot. I've met so many better coaches than me. The biggest thing I've learned from coaching on tour is like, man, I don't know nothing.
That's not necessary.
When I thought I knew a lot, you realize, wow, there's some people who've been doing this a lot longer. So, even when I look back at when I started coaching with kids in 2005, when I look at 2005 to now, I'm like, oh man, I thought I knew a lot then, but.
Well, that's probably one of the reasons why you've been as successful as you've been, because you've constantly tried to learn, you recognize what you don't know, and you try to get the information, and you don't fake that you know something you don't. And I think that's important for your player to understand and know where you're coming from as well. And speaking of that, with Sloan, so you guys have been on this big break, and I want to mention one other question from one of our viewers, Patrick Cloesy, and it kind of pertains to this, but you're coaching Sloan. You guys have been on a break. Don't know when tennis is going to start back, what tournaments are going to be played this year again. How do you manage that? How do you manage sort of the training aspects, what you're doing during this time? How do you kind of prepare her to get back whenever that may be? And, what do you see for her in terms of goals and tournament wins and Grand Slam wins?
So I think that, you want to stay ready, right? And so I think Sloan has continued to sort of work, right? And, now you don't have to cram. Now you can sort of be a little more methodical in the approach to doing it. But, we continue to work. We put a very clear calendar on how we're going to ramp up to when we think. And we've just, continued to make adjustments. So we thought we'd be playing by May 15th. And didn't happen. We thought we'd be playing by June 1st. Not going to happen. So we continue to make adjustments to the schedule. So, maybe you go from hitting twice a week to 3 times a week and 4 times a week. And then, in June, you start hitting every day. You know what I mean? So we have like a very clear calendar on how we're going to ramp up for when we anticipate to play. And then if those weeks get pushed out, then maybe we revisit. You know what I mean? But, Billie Jean says champions adjust, right? So I think during this time, during this time, we've just continued to, from a fitness standpoint, we've continued to sort of stay steady in that work. So she's been working hard in that. And then as it relates to the tennis, we're continuing to adjust to say, okay, you can't play 5 days a week if you're off for 4 months, right? It'll get real boring, right? So how do you mix it up? When do you start playing practice sets? When do you just, when do you do baskets? When do you do live ball? When do you do all that? So I think that we've been adjusting, but we haven't gone too far away from the game. And when I look at, Sloane's done well with time off. When she had time off before U.S. Open, she did well. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that, she's a very organized person and an organized thinker. And so when we have time to be organized, I think it really helps. So times like this,
could be helpful for her.
Yeah.
Which is great. And I'm gonna slide one more question in because we're like coming to the end here. Yeah. But we've been talking a lot, been hearing a lot of conversations about merger of the WTA and ATP Tour. What are your thoughts on it? What do you think the challenges would be versus the benefits?
So I think that one of the things that we need to realize that as a sport, we're in it together. And we are trying to deliver an exciting product so that we can compete with some of the other sports that are right now way ahead of us. And, I think, the ATP feels probably like they deliver a better product than a WTA. But some people disagree. Like I personally like to watch women's tennis more than I like to watch men's tennis. But I think that, World Team Tennis is sort of a great sort of team thing. We saw ATP Cup this year, right? So I think that there's been signs and signals that we need to evolve as a sport. Yeah. And perhaps, 1 + 1 = 3, right? So as it relates to revenue, if WTA is going after, this sponsor and this deal and ATP is going after a separate deal, maybe they both get what they want, but if they came together, maybe they get 2.5 times what they want. You know what I mean? Yes, so that's momentum, and if we want to have a captive audience, it's more a compelling story than WTA saying, hey, we reach X amount of players or people or viewers, and ATP saying we reach X amount of viewers. Except now together we combine those, we reach this, right? And so I think that it's a good thing. I also think that sharing expertise could help. A merger could bring different points of view in the same room versus here's what we're going to do. Y'all can follow if you want to, but good luck, right? I think that's sort of probably not the best way to approach it. So, I think it's good. I think it's sort of been discussed for a while. I know it's Billie Jean King's dream. And I think if they can do it, but still make sure that all voices are heard. What you don't want to have happen is ATP, WTA merge, and it becomes big ATP voice, little WTA voice, right?
Yeah.
Well,
So
and
Yeah.
we talk about that. We've talked about that, Kamau, as well. And like I said, are going to have a strong woman in that voice that is not afraid to speak her mind or to speak up, because they can't fade away. They can't fade away in that room.
yeah, and I think even more than a merger, we need new ideas. I mean, we
Yeah.
need to innovate as a game so that, I mean, because we are all a team. Where I like to call it the traveling circus. We go to Madrid, then we all pick up and go to Rome. Then we all pick up and go to Strasbourg or Nuremberg, or we go straight to Roland Garros, and we go to, we're all going to the same places, right?
You see the same people week
Same people.
to week
Right.
almost.
So we need to work together to deliver a more exciting product because everybody can win, right? Like, when NBA grows, it grows for the players, it grows for the owners, it grows
Yeah.
for the players, it grows for the coaches, it grows for the trainers.
That's right.
Everybody sort of benefits and begins to make a good living. And as it relates to coaches, I think if the sport grows and the pot grows for everybody, you get better coaches. There are coaches who make more money not coaching on tour. Right. And so, perhaps some of the best minds in tennis are actually not coaching on a pro tour because they can make more money staying at home. And so I think that, if we grow the pot, it'll grow for everybody. And then the product from top to bottom
That's great. Yeah.
can get better. Right.
And maybe a better calendar as well. Right.
Yep.
I mean, instead of trying to compete against each other for these weeks, WTA, ATP is working together during all of those weeks.
Absolutely. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. But more than a merger, we want new voices, right? And we want new ideas and to be more creative. I think COVID-19 has actually shown that we can be creative. You know what I mean? Like some of the Instagram lives and some of these new these platforms like the Pro Match that was televised on Tennis Channel yesterday. I mean, we can be innovative if we are forced to. So we need to be innovative when we're not forced to, right?
Yeah, this is an opportunity. Yeah, as we come out of it, not sure when, but when we do, when everyone does, it's definitely an opportunity. So love those thoughts. I mean, on that note, I mean, this has been incredible. Again, we just keep talking and the time just goes, but it's been so much fun, Kamau. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully we can continue these conversations and continued luck as well with your foundation and with Sloan as well. Once you guys do get back out, once we are able to get the tour going again.
I'm looking forward to it. So I think we get going real soon in some sort of fashion. People starting to get real creative with formats. And hey, let me tell you, they're gonna learn how to pick up their own balls now, right?
Well, I can't wait to see that.
I
can't wait to see that.
Getting their own towel, carrying
it's
their own
real.
bags.
This is like when tennis was real, when you meant to play. Yes, we did. Yeah.
I know Zina's pet peeve is when the players don't carry their own bags. Guess what? They all gonna be carrying their own bags now. They're like,
unless you if you come number one, I get it. If you're number one in the world, I get it. But the rest of the bag.
That was
fantastic.
Zina hated that. I carry the bag sometimes, Zina. I don't mind. But now with COVID, they're like, don't touch my bag.
No, yeah. Carry your own bag. Yes, fantastic. And on that note, that is it for us. Definitely continue to support both ZGA, Zina Garrison Academy, as well as XS Tennis. Go to xstennis.org. Both Kamau and Zina, you guys are doing some great things. So want to continue to support you in that. But thank you all for joining us for Game.Set.Chat live at a distance. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.